The questions Peter asked launched us into parables about the power of forgiveness, and last week the power of generosity, if you want to look at it that way, where the subject was one of having possessions is a powerful thing. We said there's nothing wrong with having possessions. It's just how we view them. Paul talks about the love of money being the problem. And Jesus is addressing Peter in such a way when the question, what are we going to have? For all of us, we know that we always think in terms of whatever we have secures our future. I mean, we're in this room tonight. I've got this house. So I figure I'm going to sleep in it tonight. It'll be here when I get up in the morning. I've got a house to live in. So that kind of secures a roof over my head. So the house becomes important to me for my future as well as my present. Money. If none of us had any bills or didn't want to give to anything in the future, it would be relatively worthless. And Jesus, what he's really saying to all of us, not just Peter, is listen, I said you have a future, so you do. Without money, without possessions. Your future's in my hands. It's not guaranteed by your possessions. Tonight we're going to stick with Peter. It's going to be the last Peter moment, and then we're going to move. James and John had their luster moments as well. We're going to look at them, so it's not like, Peter's the fall guy for the whole bunch of them. Tonight we're going to be in John 13. You may recognize that as the chapter that has the washing of the feet in it. It's funny because Peter being such a major character, when you look at the disciples and you look at the Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it seems like Peter is appears quite a bit in different settings for different things. John, he introduces Peter in his first chapter when his brother Andrew takes Peter, to meet Jesus. Then he doesn't appear again until John chapter 6. He's got one line in the year of opposition. I say the year of opposition because Jesus' 3-year ministry, he had his first year, and then he had his year of popularity, and then he had his year of opposition. So it's like 2/3 through his ministry. Aaron, would you go to John chapter 6 and read verses 68 and 69? Because Peter has a really good moment here in John chapter 6. It's the first time he's spoken in all of John's gospel. And this is when people are leaving Jesus, and Jesus basically says, are you guys going to leave me too? What does Peter say?
But Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Also we have come to believe, and you know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God.
So Peter makes this huge statement, and he is making it clear, where are we going to go? It's all about you. You're it. After that, we don't hear from Peter again until John chapter 13, and it's a rough chapter, as we're going to see tonight. He shows up again in John 18 in the garden, and it's another rough chapter that we're just going to touch on very quickly tonight. It's the chapter where he pulls his sword out and chops off the servant's ear, and before the chapter's over, he's denied Jesus, that he knows him. He appears at the tube, and then in the very last chapter, decides he's going fishing. Peter's interesting from John's kind of perspective. We're going to look at John chapter 13. That's the only part that we're going to really look at. And there's 2 bits that we're going to really kind of spend our time on. We're going to break it down into very short bits, reading a verse here, a couple verses there, a verse here. So, did you say you have John chapter 13 there, Russ? Just read the first verse.
Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he should depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end.
Now for John, this verse, you got to remember, he wasn't writing like we're reading. He wasn't writing chapters and all that. He was writing a gospel. This verse right here is like him saying, okay, we are done with everything I've said so far. And if you read it, you'd see that Jesus was loving everybody all the time. That's what he was here to do, was to love everybody. And then the same verse is going to act as the introduction almost to the rest of the book, where he's going to describe the Passion Week, the cross, the resurrection, all of that. He's going to the Father. He doesn't say Jesus is going to heaven. He says he's returning. He's going to the Father because he's done what the Father sent him to do, which was to reveal his love. He loved those that the Father gave him. He loved all those around him to the end. So in other words, he loved them through the whole 3.5-year ministry, and he's going to love them right to the end of the gospel, so to speak, which is what we've been talking about. This was not a power trip for Jesus. This was a love trip to sort out the misunderstandings about power, really. Would you continue with verses 2 through 5?
And during supper, The devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come forth from God, and was going back to God, rose from supper, and laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself about. Then he poured water into the basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded.
This is a real strong prophetic picture of Philippians chapter 2 when Paul talks about let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not think it robbery to be equal with God, something to be grasped like Adam did. Adam decided he was going to become like God. He was going to grab the opportunity. Jesus did not consider that, Paul says. That was not what was going on with Jesus. Jesus was the opposite. He was in the form of God, but emptied himself, took on the form of a servant of no reputation, became a man, came to earth. And Paul goes through all of that. And here you get this picture of Jesus, like it says, he got up, he left the table, he girds himself. It's like you can see him leaving heaven, coming to earth, doing what was necessary, and then going and sitting back down again. It's a beautiful prophetic picture of all that. It's also presented in almost like a parabolic form, as we're going to see. It's like Jesus does the parable. Instead of preaching it, he actually does the parable. The different things that we see in there, are really worth looking at. We're not going to look at them closely tonight, but the representation of a towel, the belt of truth. He wraps himself with a towel, and the basin has significance. When back at the Passover in Exodus 12, when the Passover was first established, when they would kill the lamb, they would bleed the lamb, and its blood would pour into the basin. You remember early on in John when Jesus takes water pots, the waters for purification, and turns into wine. It's like he's showing them here that the Old Testament, the old rituals, everything that they practiced in the Old Testament, the letting of the blood into the basin. Now, he's not putting blood into this basement now. He's putting water into it. He's putting the Spirit. It's newness of life, newness of spirit. And he's giving them this demonstration. This is what I'm bathing you in now, your feet. This is what I'm washing your feet in. And he's showing them representation that all the old is going away and the new is coming in because he has come from heaven to earth. He's been sent. He's been revealing God's love, and the ultimate act of love is what he's about to reveal to them, which is the laying down of his life. When it says he laid aside his garments, it's the same word that he uses, same words he uses in John 10, when he says, no man takes my life from me, I lay it down. I'm laying aside my garments. I'm laying me aside for you. It's a very, very powerful picture. And he washes their feet. We've been talking about the power of forgiveness. We talked about the power of generosity. And here what we're really looking at in this chapter and for tonight is the power of humility. And to be honest with you, it's the kind of thing that we talk about, we say we understand and comprehend. We can't say how humble we are because that would be contradicting. It really would. So we've got this power of humility, and it is powerful for sure because it's filled with love, generally for someone other than myself. Aaron, would you go to Isaiah 53? Because we're talking about pouring. Isaiah 53:12. Okay. Just read what it says about the suffering Messiah.
Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors.
He poured out his soul to death. You have to be able to see that with John 13. We are looking at the foot washing for sure, and something that was absolutely necessary, like Jesus is saying. But what we see him actually doing is pouring out his soul. That's a great description of humility, to just pour it out in order that someone else might know the love of God, the holiness that they actually have that they don't even know they have. And how will they know? By the way, feet, he's washing their feet, which has that practical element to it. They're walking around all day in a dusty street, their feet are dirty. But the symbolism, the feet to Romans and Hebrews was symbolic of authority and sexuality. So when we see feet are the things that we use every day to get around. Our feet are shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, Paul says. So we're walking in peace. We're peacemakers. We're walking by faith. We're walking in the Spirit. We're walking on a daily basis. There needs to be a cleansing, which is what Jesus is doing. There needs to be a cleansing on a daily basis, a washing, if you would, of the feet as a symbol of our authority. But the beauty of this, and what I really like about this, is Jesus is saying, but it's much more than that.